I hear somebody scream, "Burn in hell," and I replied with friendly, friendly, friendly to let them know, hey, I'm just here to help. I don't want any problems. I just want to put out the fires if there are any. I continue walking, and then I notice the Duramax. I notice a flame in the back seat of the Duramax, and I step towards the Duramax, and as I'm stepping forward, I believe his name is now Joshua Zeminski. He steps towards me with a pistol in his hand, and as I'm walking towards to put out the fire, I drop the fire extinguisher and I take a step back.
Okay. When you step back from Mr. Zeminski, what's your plan?
My plan is to get out of that situation and go back north down Sheridan Road to where the car source lot number 2 was.
And did you get back? Were you able to go in a northerly direction?
I wasn't.
Describe what happens.
Once I take that step back, I look over my shoulder, and Mr. Rosenbaum was now running from my right side, and I was cornered from in front of me with Mr. Zeminski, and there were there were 3 people right there.
Take a deep breath, Kyle.
That's what That's what I run.
We're going to just take time for our break anyway. You can just relax for a minute, sir. We're going to take a break about
coming into contact with Mr. Rosenbaum.
Yes.
And you saw Mr. Rosenbaum. What happened?
Once I got to that car and I stepped forward to put that fire in the Duramax out, and Mr. Zeminski stepped towards me, I went to go run back south down Sheridan, and Mr. Rosenbaum was right there at the corner of the Duramax, starting to chase me, and that's when I realized the only place I can run with the people around me is straight towards the building of the car source lot number 3.
When you saw Mr. Rosenbaum, that's when you said friendly, friendly?
When I heard burn inside, I don't know exactly where I was at in the time for that.
Did Mr. Rosenbaum say anything to you?
No. Mr. Zeminski instructed Mr. Rosenbaum to get him and kill him. That's what I heard.
And you go running what's been referred to the southwest corner of car source?
Yes.
And as you're running in that direction, describe being chased. What was happening?
As I'm running in that southwest direction, Mr. Rosenbaum throws, at the time, I know it's a bag now, but when he threw it at me, with the light, it looked silver and it looked like the chain when he threw it at me. And then I continue, I turn around for about a second while continuing to run, and I point my gun at Mr. Rosenbaum.
Does that stop him from chasing you?
It does not.
Okay. After you turn around and you had your hands up kind of in a low ready position?
Yes.
And you see Mr. Rosenbaum coming at you?
Yes.
And what do you do then?
After he throws the bag and he continues to run, he's gaining speed on me. A gunshot is fired from behind me, directly behind me, and I take a few steps, and that's when I turn around. And as I'm turning around, Mr. Rosenbaum is, I would say, from me to where the judge is, coming at me. with his arms out in front of him. I remember his hand on the barrel of my gun.
And why didn't you just keep running?
When I was over there, there were about 100 people surrounding those cars, and there was no space for me to continue to run to.
Okay. And so you turned around?
Yes.
And as you see him lunging at you, what do you do?
I shoot him.
And how many times did you shoot?
I believe 4.
And after you shot him, what did you do?
The people around the cars that were originally there were not there anymore. They moved away, and I ran around to see if I could help Mr. Rosenbaum.
And when you got to Mr. Rosenbaum, what was happening?
Mr. McGinnis he took off his helmet and slammed it on the ground and took off his shirt, and I don't remember what he said. I wasn't focused on that. I was in shock, sort of.
Let me back up a second. Did you know Mr. McGinnis was even around?
I didn't.
Okay. And he says something to you, and what do you do?
I pull out my phone and I call Dominic Black.
And you call Dominic, and what do you say?
I told him I just shot somebody. I had to shoot him.
And what do you do then?
I now know it to be Kelly Zeminski, Joshua Zeminski, and I don't know the other people were screaming, "Get his ass, get his ass, get him, get him, get him."
And based upon that, did you feel as though you were safe to stay where you were at?
I thought the safest option would be to go north down Sheridan to turn myself into the law enforcement down there.
And as you head down Sheridan Road, describe what's going on.
As I'm running, at first I'm in the sidewalk, and Mr. Lukowski, Jason Lukowski, is in the sidewalk, and I stop to talk to Mr. Lukowski for a brief second. I remember telling him that I just shot somebody and I need help to get to the police because a mob was chasing me.
And did Mr. Lukowski offer you any help?
I don't remember.
Okay, what do you do then?
I continued to run after hearing people were saying, cranium him, get him, kill him. People were screaming, and I just was trying to get to the police running down Sheridan Road.
And you say, I'm trying to get to the police. Why were you trying to get to the police?
Because I didn't do anything wrong. I defended myself.
Did you feel as though there was safety where the police were?
Yes.
And as you head down Sheridan Road, what's the next thing you remember?
The next thing I remember is Anthony Huber striking me in the head with a skateboard.
Okay. As you sit here today, do you remember talking to Gage Groskowitz?
Yeah, sorta, a little bit. I didn't know it was Gage Groskowitz when he came up to me, but sorta.
Okay. And when this individual runs up to you and gets how close?
I would say within a foot.
Did you shoot him?
I did not.
Did you point your gun at him?
I did not.
Why not?
I didn't see him as a threat to my safety or life.
Okay. Was he armed at that time?
Not that I noticed.
Okay. And you continue running in a northerly direction down Sheridan Road?
Correct.
And as you're running in that direction, you said the next thing you remember is Anthony Huber.
Yes.
Describe that.
Anthony Huber, what I remember is running past Anthony Huber, and as I'm running past Mr. Huber, he's holding a skateboard like a baseball bat, and he swings it down, and I block it with my arm, trying to prevent it from hitting me, but it still hits me in the neck, and as I block it, it goes flying somewhere off in the distance.
And do you stop then?
No.
What do you do next?
I keep running down Sheridan Road towards the police line.
Then what happens?
I get lightheaded, I almost pass out, and I stumble and hit the ground.
Okay. Before you hit the ground, how many times were you struck?
I believe twice.
Okay. Do you remember anything about the other one?
I remember the first one being a rock. I don't remember who did it, but I remember like the bumpiness of like a concrete rock hitting me in the back of the head.
Okay. Now, after being struck with Mr. Huber's skateboard, you end up on the ground.
Yes.
You're on the ground. What's the first thing you remember?
As I'm on the ground, there are people around me. I don't recall how many, but I remember moving my rifle in their direction, and they back off besides one person.
Okay. When you noticed people by you, you said you moved your rifle in their direction.
Yes.
Did that individual keep coming?
The last person did.
Okay. The people that stopped, what did you do to them?
Nothing.
Okay. And you're saying the last person in that group continued to come at you?
Yes.
And describe what happened.
The last person, I don't know his name. I don't think he was ever identified. Jumps at me he was wearing boots, I believe, and as he's running at me and jumping, as his boot is making contact with my face, I fired 2 shots at him.
Why did you shoot at him?
I thought if I were to be knocked out, or he would have stomped my face in if I didn't fire.
As a result of being kicked in the face, what happens?
Mr. Huber, immediately after I'm kicked in the face, runs up as I'm sitting up to try to get up and get to the police. I'm on my back, and Mr. Huber runs up. As I'm getting up, he strikes me in the neck with his skateboard a second time.
Then what happened?
He grabs my gun, and I can feel it pulling away from me, and I can feel the strap starting to come off my body.
And what do you do then?
I fire 1 shot.
And after you fire, striking, we now know Mr. Huber, what do you do?
I lower my weapon, and I see Mr. Grosskreutz with his hands up, and as I'm lowering my weapon, I look down, and then Mr. Grosskreutz, he lunges at me with his pistol pointed directly at my head.
Now, you heard Mr. Grosskrewitz's testimony about re-racking.
Yes.
Did you re-rack your weapon?
I did not.
Could I have the exhibit, please? Make sure to see if you would. Showing you what's been previously marked, Exhibit 28. Do you recognize this?
I do.
Now, when somebody would, as Mr. Grosskreutz said, re-rack, is that this?
Yes.
Do you call it re-racking?
I call it charging, putting a live round into the chamber.
And to recharge, you have to pull this all the way back?
Yes.
Say that's about 4 inches? No, I'm asking you if you agree with that approximation. Mr. Rittenhouse, how far do you think that is?
3-4 inches.
And if the weapon is loaded and you re-rack, what happens?
If there's already a round in the chamber, when you re-rack the rifle, a live round would come out, chambering a new round into the chamber.
Now, we got to the point where Mr. Grosskreutz is standing in front of you, has his hands up.
Correct.
And are you aware that he's armed?
At that point, I do see a pistol in his hand.
Is that the same or different from your first encounter with Mr. Grosskreutz?
That is different.
And he is standing, you said. How close to you?
What I remember is our feet were touching, what it seemed like.
Okay. And you do what?
My rifle is down, his hands are up, his pistol is in his hand, and then Mr. Grosskreutz looks at me, and that's when Mr. Grosskreutz brings his arm down like this, like his arm is like that with me on the ground, and his pistol is pointed at me, and that's when I shoot him.
How many times did you shoot him?
Once.
And after you shoot Mr. Grosskreutz, do you know where you shot him?
No.
What happens after you shoot him?
He's no longer a threat to me. There's only one person in front of me, and his hands are up. I briefly point my rifle at him, and I get onto one knee, getting up, and he backs up with his hands up, and I don't shoot him.
Did you notice anybody to your side?
To my left, there was a gentleman with a pipe, and to my right, I believe it was a fence post. I don't know what it was, but it was a large object.
Once you're to your feet, what do you do?
I start walking towards the police line to turn myself into the police.
Describe, where is the police line? Is it still in the same place?
It moved up a little bit.